I think of my father now, I think of, as I say, a distant figure, highly intellectual, brilliant, but a distant figure. My father was always occupied, he was always doing something. He was either doing chazonim or he was writing music. My relationship with my brother was very good. He was excellent towards me. He looked after me. He tried to protect me, and I'm sure that he was very fond of me. And I liked that because it was a very loving relationship. In fact, I probably got more affection from my brother than I did from my parents. We left Germany in 1933. My father was a chazan in Berlin, and when Hitler came to power in January 1933, he decided that that was the time to go.
So Dad went to London, where things were good. He had a job, you know, it wasn't the best job in the world, but it kept the family, kept us alive. How can you forget London? How can you forget King's Cross? I had a wonderful time, and they were wonderful years. But as always, when one is living them, one doesn't realize that they're wonderful years.
My father actually only stayed in England from 1933 to 1940. At the beginning of the war, the British government became quite paranoid about anybody with foreign names or foreign connections. And so he was an enemy alien, and he was interned in Britain. And after a short internment, they sent them to Australia. And he was one of those. He and my brother were two that went in that batch on the famous ship Dunera to Australia.
I was called back to London, and I turned up back to where we lived in Trafalgar Square. Well, two very burly looking guys, you know, the CID people always look the same in every country. They searched my room upstairs. I lived in the attic, and they found German books. And some of them were from the First World War, like books that kids read, like Buffalo Bill, but in German, you know. And to them, as far as they were concerned, I was and my father, we were the original spies. And so they arrested us and to just drag us away without any baggage, just the way we were. And then we were interned as enemy aliens and brought into this camp. And then one day names appeared mysteriously on the board saying, "These people line up tomorrow morning, you're being shipped to Canada. We don't want you in this country." The trouble is with my father was that he was very well brought up and certainly not a revolutionary. When I suggested to him, look, there are 25,000 people in this camp. What are they going to do, start searching for you? Just don't turn up. He said, no, order is order, and if the British government says turn up, I will turn up. There was nothing I could do. And the irony of it was that my name was not on the list.
Strangely enough, I recall almost nothing. One day they were there and the next day they weren't, and I didn't really understand what was happening. It was explained to me by my mother, but I think I was really too young to understand what went on. And it was also in the context of a war situation. The war had just broken out, and there were so many other things going on, and I just wasn't really with it at all.
So anyway, this was the situation. We came onto this boat, and they literally, the so-called marvelous British soldiers fighting for democracy and freedom, just took everything off us. Everything. They ripped watches off people's arms. And it was an unbelievable situation. You'd expect that from the SS or the stormtroopers, not from the British Army. For Dad, this was unbelievable. He just couldn't cope with it. Can you imagine taking Jane Austen and suddenly putting her in Las Vegas? And so we sailed off, as you know, not to Canada, but to Australia.
Men of the British Expeditionary Force march on to Australian soil. Soldiers of the campaign in Flanders, in France, heroes of the evacuation of Dunkirk. They arrive as escort to a shipload of enemy internees. They march right into Australian heart. They and the officers who lead them, men who already have met the Nazi war machine, defied it.
Hay is a sort of superior Sudan, if you can imagine it. You know, miles upon kilometers of just desert and sandstorms and nothing. All our so-called complaints were voices in the wilderness. So it was almost like, you know, the prophet Isaiah or getting lost in the Sahara Desert. They'd put up these huts, and they shoved us into these huts, and Dad just couldn't take it. The whole thing was just, for him, a complete emotional collapse. And of course I was of little help to him, because my cynicism, you know, saw this as an alternate way of life, if you like.
My father wrote to me several times from Australia, and they were wonderful letters. They were very descriptive of the country. They were descriptive of the fauna and flora of the country. He explained to me, in fact, on a couple of occasions, he actually included the leaves of trees.
For my father, it was simply a question of carrying on what he'd been doing all his life, and that is to involve people in music making. And seeing we didn't have many instruments, it was singing. Obviously the human voice was the obvious outlet. He was passionate about a certain type of music and its expression, that the single human voice can be more expressive than a Brahms symphony using, you know, 50 players banging away.
I think I missed my father. I missed a father, and I didn't have one. And I was brought up in a matriarchal society. It was just my mother and my grandmother. Especially since my friends, most of them had fathers, and I never had one. And I think I missed him. I did, yes. I missed Felix too.
The juxtaposition of somebody coming from a particular way of life and suddenly find himself in this incredible nothing. And Dad couldn't take it. He just got sicker and sicker and sicker. We were finally transferred from New South Wales, which is Hay, to Victoria, to the camp in Tatura, where the thing continued. And then, of course, when obviously he was so sick that he just couldn't be coped with in this camp, they decided that he had to go to a hospital.
Felix wrote to us to tell us that my father died, and it was a very sad occasion. I mean, we weren't there for the funeral, we weren't there to see his last days. I think he missed his family very much, and it was very poignant. The whole thing was just a mess. It was terrible. It's not a period that anyone really wants to remember in the family. It was just very sad that we were apart.
I felt for him that he deserved a better ending. But who doesn't, you know? He did not have a good last few years, I'm afraid. It didn't warrant his whole life and everything he believed in didn't warrant such an ending.
I wish more than anything that I'd got to know him better. I find that the biggest void in my life.
My father, he died for his way of life inside of him. That's what happened, that's how it went.
Schoenen gegangen, farmos we mikve, und hat farasch feitig, die Tekies. Aber immer malamet, 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 aber immer malamet. Serbium Kippur gepegert auf Weißerhorn und ist geblieben una Kapora. Bei Avrim Malamet, Avrim Malamet, Avrim Malamet, Avrim Malamet, Avrim Malamet, Avrim Malamet, Avrim